Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is a man who needs no introduction, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, Steve Forbes. Steve, thank you so much for joining me.
Good to be with you, Brittany, on this historic day. Thank you.
A historic day, to say the least. In the biggest modern-day political comeback, Donald Trump has once again won the presidency after losing in 2020. So to kick off the conversation, Steve, I want your unvarnished take. What's your reaction?
Well, this historic nature of it, of course, you've alluded to. When I was in college, I did my thesis on the 1892 presidential election, where Grover Cleveland won a term after losing his first bid for a second term. So this seemed almost a deja vu. But in terms of the election itself, it was historic. In terms of the breakthrough the Republican Party has made on numerous fronts, the party has changed. And I think the changes in terms of the voters that it attracted will last beyond Donald Trump. Just a few factoids. 2/3 of Native Americans voted for Trump. 46% of Hispanics voted for Trump, including 54% of male Hispanics, which no Republican candidate has done. Trump did better than even Bush on that. He won 55% of the male vote, 45% of the female vote. And the Asian vote, he won 45%, which was a high for Republicans. So the demographics of the Republican Party have changed. And I think one reason why you saw the result was that people really felt that this was an election about what direction the country goes in. Will it be more of the traditional free enterprise direction, or will we become more like a European government-dominated economy where you have very sluggish growth rates and massive government presence? And I think the voters have registered their dissatisfaction with it. But Brittany, what's happened, though, is not just in the U.S. There's a global turning away from what you might call the establishment, the elites, especially since COVID. Every major country that's had an election in the last 4 years or so has seen a huge change in government, whether it was the UK, Holland, Belgium, France, Japan, India, Argentina, you name it, there's been huge changes. Canada has an election next year, and the polls show that the incumbent government headed by Trudeau will be resoundingly defeated. People are not happy with what has happened, either culturally, and I think that was epitomized by the controversy you saw in the Olympics of men competing in women's sports. On the economic side, the feeling of sluggishness that we're not moving the way we should. So it was a resounding vote. And what was amazing on some of the states was you take a blue state like New Jersey, Kamala Harris won it only by about 5.5 points. Usually a Democrat would win it by 10 or 15. You saw the same thing in Illinois, usually 15, 20-point margin, only 7 or 8 points. And surprisingly, Minnesota, the home state of the vice presidential candidate, Governor Wirtz, was the Kamala Harris one only carried it by only a little over 4%. So on the Senate side, I think we're going to take Pennsylvania, so that's at least 53 seats, and probably have a narrow margin in the House. What it means in the Senate is that Trump will have an easier time with cabinet confirmations when you have a majority of, say, 53 rather than 51.
And to your point, New York City, obviously a traditionally blue city, Trump even made inroads here. So the Republican Party, as you noted, the demographics are changing. Donald Trump overperformed in almost every demographic. Vice President Kamala Harris underperformed or did not overperform Biden in any state since his 2020 race. So what does this say about the Republican Party now? And do you think that this election was really a referendum on the left?
Well, I think what it means for the Republicans is finding now ways to deliver. I think they'll move ahead very quickly on getting tax cuts, especially the 2017 tax cuts, get them renewed, get them tucked away with additional tax cuts, such as no taxes on tips, which gave Trump the state of Nevada, and no Social Security taxes. Then I think they will do some clawbacks on spending. There's hundreds of billions of unspent dollars. Regulation will be eased, starting with the energy side, removing the barriers, for example, on exporting liquefied natural gas. The world has a real hunger for that. And but two areas where I think the Republicans are going to have to be very careful. One is the area of tariffs. Using a tariff as a means to reduce trade barriers, as a tool to reduce trade barriers, is one thing, sort of surgically applied. But the trouble with tariffs is once you put it on, tariff is another word for tax, very hard to remove, because special interests will grow around it. The other one is how they handle deportation of illegal immigrants. If they start with the criminals and the gangs, I think that they can pull off. But when it comes to the millions who came here illegally, I think they're going to have to treat that very delicately because they're going to be looked at very closely how people are treated if they don't pass muster in these courts that determine whether their application for refugee status is legitimate or not. So there are plenty of obstacles in the way, but I think it's going to be full bore on tax cuts, energy deregulation, and other forms of deregulation.
As you've talked about at length, the economy was the top issue in this election, and Wall Street reacted really strongly to Donald Trump's victory this morning. So could you read the tea leaves here for us? Is this foreshadowing good things to come when it comes to the economy with 4 more years of Trump?
I think it foreshadows good things if they get these tax cuts through and they're able to proceed with a serious deregulation. But one of the things they're also going to have to look at, which no previous president has, and that is the economic models used by the Federal Reserve, which boil down to the idea that prosperity causes inflation. And gold price, at least until today, has been signaling concern about the value of the dollar going ahead. And so the new administration is going to have to tackle how the Fed operates. I think they've got some people possibly coming in like David Malpass, former head of the World Bank, who also has had a vast experience in the Treasury Department, who can start to make that institutional change so we don't have a central bank that gets nervous when people start to do well.
I do now want to zoom out just a bit and look at the global implications here. The world's eyes are on us on election night and beyond. They see that Donald Trump did win once again. What are they thinking?
The rest of the world?
The rest of the world. All international eyes on the United States. What are our allies thinking, and what are our enemies thinking too?
Well, our allies, I think, view the results with a bit of trepidation. But I think they can take some comfort in the contrast between Trump's rhetoric and bomb throwing, you might say, rhetorical bomb throwing in his first administration, and how things were actually negotiated. A prime example being the old NAFTA free trade agreement, which Trump vigorously denounced and made it very clear he's going to put it in a dumpster. But the end result was an updated version of it with some positive changes, not all positive, but overall very positive changes. So I think you're going to have to distinguish between the fireworks and the substance that's done around the negotiating table. And I think our allies actually would like some firm U.S. leadership instead of the tentative reactions we've had today. Trump has to make serious decisions on things like Ukraine, where the policy of this administration is to starve the Ukrainians of the needed weaponry, letting them have enough to barely survive, but not enough to regain territory that would put them in a very good negotiating position against Vladimir Putin. The Chinese are going to certainly test us. The Iranians are going to test us. But I think they look upon Trump as somebody who will take strong action He demonstrated that when he killed one of the chief terrorists who worked for Iran. We took him out, and the Iranians were stunned by it. So I think they will be much more cautious than they would have been if Kamala Harris had won the election. So our adversaries, I think, were quietly rooting for the current regime or continuation of it. And our allies are hoping that Trump will provide a firm framework. We have to have a new strategy in this world, just as we did after World War II, a very changed world. And I think that's going to be a key task of this new administration. Foreign policy, defense policy was not much discussed in the campaign, but it's going to be a foremost issue going forward. The world is in a very precarious position right now, worse since World War II.
Let's talk about that new strategy a little bit, because as you said earlier, we're really at a historic moment here. We saw 4 years of Donald Trump, 4 years of President Biden. We're going back to 4 years of Donald Trump. Is this going to be a continuation of 2017 to the beginning of 2021? What does that look like?
Well, I think what you're going to see this time is in terms of personnel. I think it was Ronald Reagan who once said, personnel is policy. And I think you're going to see much more attention paid to the people they appoint. I think they know that they have to clear out holdovers who were very obstructionist when Trump took over in 2017. So I think the experience of the first term, you'll see a much different, more informed procedure going forward in terms of how you get your hands around this government that is mostly very hostile to a lot of the policies that the new administration is going to pursue, particularly on the regulatory side. So there's going to be a lot of internal bureaucratic fights. But this time also, the administration has two big Supreme Court decisions on their side. One was, of course, West Virginia versus EPA, and the other was what they call the Chevron deference, which said that regulatory agencies can't enact major pieces of what are in effect legislation without congressional approval. And also, I think you're going to see a push to pass something called the REINS Act, which will mean that Congress has to approve major pieces of regulation that are going to cost the economy more than $100 million. And the passage of the REINS Act, plus those two Supreme Court decisions, I think you'll see some real headway made against a very obstinate, power-hungry bureaucracy, both in the government itself and in the regulatory agencies.
There have been obviously endless conversations since Donald Trump won in the middle of the night until now. It was a decisive victory, clearly shows that American voters do want change from the current administration. The Democrats I've talked to have come to the consensus that they need to look inward. The party needs to do some soul searching. When you hear all of these post-mortem conversations, do you think anything's missing?
Not really. The reaction, of course, was shock, especially on the Democratic side. They did not expect this to happen, or the sweeping nature of what happened. Even in legislative races, the Republicans did well, what they called down ballot. And some of the initiatives that the far left of the party had pursued, like this thing called ranked choice voting, where you just don't vote for somebody, you also rank the others. And so you've had cases where somebody wins the election but ends up being defeated because of the way ranked choice is working. Maine has it, San Francisco has it, New York City has it, Alaska has it, and there are various variations of what they call ranked choice was on the ballots of 5 different states. And in every one of those states, it was resoundingly defeated. So people don't want some of the crazy things on the culture side. They don't want the electoral system tampered with. And what I think helps Trump in these battles ahead is that he won the popular vote. And it looks like he might even win a majority of the popular vote, not just a plurality, but a majority, which he clearly did not do in the previous 2 elections. So I hope the Democrats, once they get over the shock and expressing outrage, do look inward and figure out where do we go from here. and try to recreate perhaps some of the spirit of the old Democratic Party, especially on issues like national security.
Steve, I always appreciate our conversations because I always learn so much in them. You're a student of history, so I do want to go back just 4 years ago. 2020 election, Donald Trump loses, then there's January 6th. Do you think we would be sitting here 4 years from that day talking about a Trump victory in 2024? And if you could pick one event, one instance, one thing that you can point to that to say, hey, that's what brought us here today, what would that be?
I think it would be, obviously, from 40,000 feet, it would be the policies they pursued, which failed on so many levels, opening the borders, not getting control of the borders, trying to raise taxes, doing a binge on regulations where you wonder if you can keep your car or your dishwasher or your lawnmower, and basic things like that. And but I think in terms of what started to turn things was two things. One is when Biden, who was clearly suffering from dementia, and the tragedy there is once that disease starts, there's no drugs yet that can reverse it. And his unwillingness to step down and announce a year and a half ago, or certainly in the summer of 2023, that it's time to pass the torch on to a new generation and allow the Democrats to have a normal process of picking a new nominee, was hugely a mistake on his part, and actually a very selfish act on his part. And then the party going along with this until it became clearly evident that he could not carry on his normal duties as president, and then trying to ram in the vice president, Kamala Harris, and not have her go through the normal vetting process of primaries, conventions, caucuses, and the like, which that way people could get to know a candidate instead of wondering what we have here. So in that sense, I think in terms of the democratic process, small d democratic process, what had been going on was sort of a perversion. Most of the things they did against Trump, the indictments they did against Trump, were clearly political in nature. And I think that probably as much as anything turned people off. So bad performance, bad behavior, bad democratic procedures combined to give this result. So the wonderful thing about the American political system is usually when a party gets a thrashing enough times, they do sit down and figure out, okay, how do we change? Parties never stay the same forever.
Well, Steve, on this historic day, I am grateful to have this conversation with you, for you to come on and provide all of your insight. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Brittany. Look forward to doing it again sometime soon.